Every morning begins the same way. I wake up at 4 when it's still dark outside, and then lie there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house. I used to hear Edith breathing quietly beside me at this time. Now all I hear is the creaking of old beams and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the living room. 73 is the age when sleep becomes a luxury and loneliness becomes a habit. My name is Norbert Hampshire, and for the past 3 years, I have been living alone in a 2-story house on the outskirts of Berwyn. The house is too big for one person, but selling it would mean betraying Edith's memory. We bought it 40 years ago when I got the job as chief engineer at the STOR mine. At the time, it seemed like the height of luxury: 4 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a fireplace, a backyard with apple trees. Edith dreamed that the rooms would be filled with children's laughter, but fate decided otherwise. We had only one daughter, Beverly. I get out of bed, wincing from the pain in my joints. The cold floor beneath my feet brings me back to reality. On the nightstand is a photograph of Edith in a silver frame. She was 67 when cancer took her. Too soon. I still talk to her in the mornings, telling her about the little things that happened the day before. Sometimes I think she answers. Everything in the kitchen is arranged the way Edith liked it. Cups in the cupboard above the sink, a frying pan on a hook near the stove, jars of cereals on the bottom shelf. With a familiar movement, I turn on the kettle and take out a tin box of tea. Edith always insisted on loose tea, not tea bags. That's the difference between real life and its imitation, she used to say. Dawn is breaking outside the window. Berwyn wakes up slowly, like an old man after a long sleep. This town was never lively, and after the mine closed 12 years ago, it fell into a deep slumber. Many left to find work in the capital, but for people like me, it's too late to start from scratch. And there's no point. While the kettle boils, I look through yesterday's mail: bills, advertisements, a catalog of gardening tools, and an envelope from the clinic. I open it with my uncooperative fingers, even though I already know what's inside. Dr. Freeman warned me last week. Early-stage Parkinson's disease. It's not good news, but it's not a death sentence. At least not right away. I fold the letter and put it in the pocket of my bathrobe. Beverly mustn't know, at least not yet. She already looks at me as if I were a burden. In her eyes, I have long since become a decrepit old man who does nothing but grumble and complain about the modern world. Maybe she's right about some things. The story of my daughter and me is a story of gradual estrangement. When Beverly was little, we were inseparable. I took her fishing, taught her how to fix broken toys, told her about underground tunnels and rock formations. She listened with wide eyes and asked 1,000 questions. And then came a transitional period when my daughter turned into a sullen teenager who locked herself in her room and avoided conversation. I thought it would pass, but it didn't. Beverly went away to college on the other side of the country and came back a completely different person. The tea is getting cold, and I'm still sitting here staring out the window. Today I need to go to the bank to discuss the details of Walter's inheritance transfer. My brother died 2 months ago, leaving me a decent amount of money and a collection of antique watches that he had collected throughout his life. We weren't particularly close. We saw each other every few years at family celebrations and called each other on important dates. But Walter was a lonely man. He had no children, and he outlived his wife by 15 years. Everything should stay in the family, he wrote in his will. It's strange to receive such a gift from fate at the age of 73. What should I do with this money? Buy a new car to replace my old Ford? Go on a trip around the world? It all seems pointless. Although, maybe I should set aside some of the money for medical treatment. Dr. Freeman mentioned a new experimental therapy. Insurance doesn't cover everything. I finish my tea and go to get dressed. In the closet hang the suits I used to wear to work. They're too big for me now. I've lost weight and become gaunt with age. I choose a gray sweater and pants. Edith said gray suits me. It matches your eyes and gray hair, she joked. On the way to the bank, I stop at Peter's Cafe. The owner, Peter Hayes, used to work with me in the mine. Now he serves coffee and bakes the best cinnamon rolls in town. The cafe is the only place where I don't feel like a stranger. Old people like me gather here. We discuss the weather, politics, illnesses. Sometimes we reminisce about the past. "How's life, Norb?" Peter asks, placing a cup of coffee and a plate with a bun in front of me. "You look tired." Same as usual, I reply without going into details. Have you heard the news about James Ridley? They say his grandson got into medical school. We talk about the children and grandchildren of our mutual acquaintances. Everyone has something to boast about. Everyone except me. Beverly never gave me a reason to be proud. No, she didn't hit rock bottom, become addicted to drugs, or get involved in crime. She just chose a life in which there was no place for me. She got a degree in marketing, got a job at a large company, and married Clyde Pembroke, who is just as ambitious and career-driven as she is. Now they live in the prestigious Berwyn neighborhood, in a house that costs more than I've earned in my entire life. After the cafe, I go to the bank. A young employee with a name tag that says Tessa smiles at me with a professional smile and invites me to sit down. I explain the reason for my visit. She nods and starts typing something on the computer. Mr. Hampshire, we need a few more documents to complete the procedure. Here is a list. She hands me a glossy booklet. When you have everything you need, come back and we will transfer the funds to your account. I leave the bank with a feeling of incompleteness. Bureaucracy is the only thing that works flawlessly in this world. On the way back, I decide to walk. The doctor recommended more exercise and I try to follow his advice. I know every stone on the streets of Berwyn. Here is the park where Edith and I used to walk on Sundays. Here is the school Beverly attended, and here is the church where we were married 50 years ago. As I walk by, I slow down. Should I go in? But what for? I haven't believed for a long time that anyone hears our prayers. When I get home, the first thing I do is check the answering machine. One call. Beverly's voice sounds tense. Hi, Dad. It's me. Just wanted to see how you were doing. Call me back when you have time. She never calls just to call. Has something happened? Or maybe she found out about the inheritance. News travels fast in small towns. I look at my watch. It's almost 6 in the evening. Is it too late to call? No, Beverly usually works late. I dial her number. 3 rings and she picks up. Yes? Beverly, it's me. You called. Oh, Dad. Yes, I did. How are you? Her voice sounds distant, as if she's talking to a client rather than her father. Fine. Why? No reason, just Clyde and I were thinking maybe you'd like to come over for dinner this Friday? It's been a while. So that's it. Now I understand. Of course, it's about the inheritance. Beverly hadn't invited me to dinner in over a year. The last time was at Christmas, and even then, I felt like I was intruding. Friday? I ask, buying time. I don't know. I'll have to check my calendar. That's funny. What calendar? My days are all the same, like twins. Dad, please, Clyde will make steaks. You love steaks. Her voice takes on a pleading tone. She used that tone when she was a child, begging for a new toy. Okay, I give in. Friday. What time? 7. I'll send you a taxi. No need for a taxi. I'll drive my own car. Are you sure? You've been... I'm not so old that I've forgotten the way to your house. I cut her off. See you Friday. I hang up and sit down in an armchair. All the windows in my house have a view of the sky, but I feel like the walls are closing in on me. The letter from the clinic is burning a hole in my pocket. Now he has another ordeal to face. Dinner with his daughter. Clyde Pembroke. I've never liked my brother-in-law. Smooth, with perfect hair, and a smile that never reaches his eyes. He's the kind of person who judges others by the cost of their suits and the make of their cars. When he first came to our house, he looked around the living room as if he had stumbled into a museum of antique furniture. What an authentic home you have, he said, and I knew then that we would never be friends. Beverly met him at a corporate party. He worked for a rival firm, but quickly moved to her company for a higher salary. 6 months later, they announced their engagement. The wedding was lavish and tasteless. Edith was already ill at the time, but she insisted that we go. She's our only daughter, she said. We sat in the corner of the banquet hall, feeling out of place at this celebration of life. Beverly barely found the time to come over and ask if everything was okay. After Edith's death, our meetings with our daughter became even more rare and formal. She would call once a month, ask how I was doing, if I needed anything, and quickly end the conversation, citing her busy schedule. Sometimes I wonder, if Edith were alive, would things be different? Or would Beverly have distanced herself from us anyway? I take the letter from the clinic out of my pocket and reread it. Early stage, progressive disease, regular monitoring is necessary. The words blur before my eyes. What will happen when I can no longer take care of myself? A nursing home? The thought is terrifying. I've seen these places. Sterile corridors, the smell of medicine and despair, old people with empty eyes in wheelchairs. No, I won't tell Beverly about the diagnosis. At least not now. First, I need to sort out Walter's inheritance, secure a safety net for myself. Maybe hire a caregiver when things get really bad. It's getting dark. I turn on the TV, but I don't listen to the announcers. My thoughts revolve around the upcoming dinner. What will I say to my daughter? What does she want to hear from me? We've been speaking different languages for a long time. Dinner at Beverly's, dinner with a person I once knew better than anyone else in the world, but now barely recognize, with a person who looks at me as if I were a problem that needs to be solved. Well, at least it will be a break from the monotony of my days. Before going to bed, I take the pills Dr. Freeman prescribed. They help reduce the tremors in my hands. So far, it's barely noticeable. A slight tremor when I'm nervous or tired, but the doctor says it will get worse over time. I lie in bed and stare at the ceiling. Edith, if only you were here. You always knew what to say to Beverly, how to get through to her. I only ruin everything with my bluntness and stubbornness. Outside the window, the leaves of the apple trees rustle. Autumn is coming soon. Another year is coming to an end. I wonder how many I have left, and what will I do with the inheritance I receive? Maybe I should leave some of the money to Beverly. After all, she is my daughter, the only family I have left. With these thoughts, I fall asleep and dream of Edith, young and smiling, in a sea-green dress. We walk along the shore of an ocean I have never seen in real life and talk about the future, a future that never came. Friday came unexpectedly quickly. All week I kept myself busy so I wouldn't think about the upcoming dinner at Beverly's. I looked through old photos, read detective novels I borrowed from the city library, and even started repairing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. It was useless. My thoughts kept returning to my daughter and her sudden invitation. The morning was cool. October in Beirut is a time when nature freezes before the long winter. The trees are almost bare, the grass is turning yellow, and the sky is taking on a shade of old silver. I love this time of year. It reminds me of Edith. She always said that autumn is more honest than spring because it doesn't give false hope. After breakfast, I decide to walk to the post office. A small package is waiting for me there. A watch from Walter's collection that had to be sent to a workshop in a neighboring town. It's an old Patek Philippe pocket watch, over 100 years old. Walter was particularly fond of it. "It's the heart of the collection," he said, showing me the intricate engraved mechanism. I walked down the main street, leaning on my cane. It's not that I really need it, but Dr. Freeman insisted. "Better to have support and not use it than to fall when there's no one to help," he said. Reasonable, though I feel like an old man from a Victorian novel. The post office is quiet as usual. Martha Jenkins, who seems to have worked here since the beginning of time, is sitting behind the counter. She nods and smiles at me. "Good morning, Mr. Hampshire. Your package arrived last night. Just a moment." Martha disappears into the back room and returns with a small box. I sign for it and thank her. "How's your daughter?" she asks, and there is genuine interest in her voice. I haven't seen her in a long time. "She's fine," I reply. "I'm going to her place for dinner tonight." "How lovely. Family dinners are so important. Give her my best." I nod, even though I know I never will. Beverly doesn't remember Martha, just as she doesn't remember most people from her childhood. It's as if she has cut off that part of her life when she was just the daughter of a miner from a small town. At home, I open the package. The watch looks like new. The watchmaker did an excellent job. I carefully wind the mechanism and put it to my ear. The ticking is steady and confident, like the heartbeat of a healthy person. Not like mine, with its interruptions and pauses. I put the watch on the table and sit down in an armchair. There are still a few hours before dinner, but I already feel a growing sense of unease. What will I say to Beverly? What will we talk about? Our rare conversations always boil down to an exchange of news. Dry, edited, safe. She talks about work. I talk about my garden or the books I've read. No deep topics, no real feelings. Has it always been this way? No, of course not. Beverly and I used to be close. I remember her sitting on my lap at age 5 while I read her fairy tales. When she was 10, she would come to me with her school projects, and we would build papier-mâché volcanoes or draw maps of the constellations together. When she was 15, she cried on my shoulder when her first boyfriend broke up with her. And then something changed. Maybe it was when she was 17. Beverly dreamed of going to a prestigious college on the East Coast, but I insisted that she stay closer to home. We couldn't afford it, and why did she need to go so far away? There were excellent universities in our state. We had a big fight then. She yelled that I was ruining her life, that she hated Berwyn and everything associated with it. Edith tried to reconcile us, but to no avail. In the end, Beverly enrolled in a local university, but she never forgave me. After graduation, she immediately left for the capital, found a job there, and only came home for major holidays. Even when Edith fell ill, she didn't stay long. She came for the weekend, sat in the hospital for a few hours, and left, citing important meetings and projects. I get up from my chair and walk over to the window. The day is clear but cold. The apple trees in the garden are almost bare, with only a few branches still holding yellowed leaves. Edith loved these trees. Every fall she made apple jam and compotes that lasted all winter. Now the apples just fall and rot on the ground. I have neither the strength nor the desire to pick them up. My gaze falls on the clock. It's almost noon. It's time to get ready for the evening. Although, what is there to prepare? Take a shower, shave, choose decent clothes. All this will take an hour at most. But I start getting ready anyway, dragging out the process to fill the emptiness of the day. In the bathroom, I stare at my reflection in the mirror for a long time. Who is this old man with deep wrinkles and a dull gaze? Where is the young engineer who used to go down into the mine with a smile because he loved his job? Where is the happy husband who used to rush home every evening to his beloved wife? Time hasn't just changed me. It's as if it has replaced one person with another. I shave carefully, trying not to cut myself. My hands are shaking slightly, more than usual today. Am I nervous about the upcoming dinner, or is it a sign of illness? Dr. Freeman said that stress can exacerbate symptoms. I need to calm down. After my shower, I go to the bedroom to choose my clothes. I open the closet and freeze in front of the rows of shirts and pants. What to wear to dinner with a daughter who is ashamed of your existence? I choose a dark blue shirt and gray pants. Classic. Nothing flashy. Nothing that would provoke a mocking look from Clyde. I get dressed slowly, methodically, buttoning my shirt. Fragments of thoughts spin around in my head. Walter's inheritance, illness, Beverly. It's all connected somehow, but I can't grasp the connection. Inheritance, house, bank account, watch collection. What will happen to all this when I'm gone? I don't have a will. Somehow I never thought about it before. By law, everything will go to Beverly. She's my only heir. Is that fair? Does she deserve it? My daughter always treated my house like a cluttered museum that was long overdue for demolition. Dad, why do you need such a huge house? Sell it and buy a smaller apartment. Or move into a nursing home. At least they'll take care of you there, she said after Edith's death. And now that Walter's money has come in, is that why she suddenly remembered I existed? News travels fast in small towns. Someone must have already told her about the inheritance. But she is still my daughter, my flesh and blood. Maybe I'm too hard on her. Perhaps her aloofness is a defensive reaction. She also lost her mother and suffered too. We just express our pain differently. The clock shows 3 o'clock. There are still 4 hours until dinner, but I'm already fully dressed and don't know what to do with myself. I decide to go down to the basement and look for that old photo of Beverly, Edith, and me on a picnic by the lake. Beverly was 12 at the time. We were happy. The basement is dusty and damp. Boxes of photographs are stacked in the far corner. I sit down on an old stool and start sorting through the pictures. Here is Edith on our wedding day, young, radiant, in a simple white dress. Here I am in my work clothes at the mine entrance. Here is Beverly taking her first steps, clinging to my fingers. Time flies by unnoticed. When I finally find the photo I'm looking for, the clock in the living room strikes 6. It's time to leave if I want to arrive on time. Beverly's house is in a new neighborhood in Berwyn, 15 minutes drive from downtown. I put the photos back in the box, but I put one, the one from the picnic, in my shirt pocket. Maybe I'll show it to Beverly. Maybe it will remind her of the days when we were a real family. I go upstairs, grab my jacket and car keys, and leave the house. The evening is cool but quiet. The streetlights are already on, illuminating the deserted street with a soft yellowish light. My old Ford is parked in the garage. I rarely use it these days. I mostly walk or take the bus. But today is a special occasion. The car doesn't start on the first try. The engine coughs like an old smoker, but then finally comes to life. I pull out onto the road and slowly head toward the new neighborhood. Berwyn is changing. It used to be a mining town where everyone knew each other. Now there are new neighborhoods with modern houses, shopping centers, and trendy chain restaurants. The city authorities are trying to attract investors and turn Berwyn into a tourist destination. A city with history and a future. Now that's what it says on the new billboards. These changes tend to annoy me. Old Berwyn is dying, and what is replacing it seems as fake as plastic flowers on a grave. The neighborhood where Beverly lives is called Green Hills. There are no hills there, and no more greenery than in any other part of town. Instead, there are neat two-story houses standing close together, like soldiers in formation. They all look alike, like twin brothers. White walls, dark roofs, small, well-kept yards. I drive up to Beverly's house and park at the curb. My beat-up Ford looks out of place here, like a vagrant at a high society party. A neighbor boy riding a bike looks at the car with interest. I get out and nod to him. He turns away and quickly rides off. Apparently, his parents taught him not to talk to strangers. Beverly's house is identical to all the others on the street, except for the flowers on the porch. Roses. Edith loved roses. I wonder if Beverly remembers that. I walk down the path to the front door. My heart is beating faster than usual. It's funny to be nervous before meeting my own daughter, like a teenager before their first date. But I'm really nervous. Every time we've met in recent years has been awkward, tense, full of unspoken words. I climb the steps and press the doorbell. Inside the house, I hear a melodic trill, then quick footsteps. The door opens and Beverly appears on the threshold. She looks like her mother. The same brown eyes, the same jawline. But there is something of me in her too. A high forehead, a straight nose. Today she looks especially elegant. A black, knee-length dress, pearl earrings, her hair pulled back into a neat bun. It's as if she's welcoming an important client rather than her father. "Dad," she says with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "You're right on time. Come in." I take a step forward and she awkwardly hugs me. She smells of expensive perfume. Too strong, almost dizzying. "Hello, Beverly," I reply, pulling away. "Beautiful house." "Thank you. We recently renovated the living room." Clyde chose the furniture himself. She leads me inside and I find myself in a spacious hall with high ceilings and marble floors. Everything looks like it came straight out of the pages of an interior design magazine. Perfect, flawless, and impersonal. Not a single photograph on the walls, not a single personal item that would tell me anything about the owners of the house. Clyde appears from the kitchen. Tall, fit, with a perfect smile. He is wearing an expensive sweater and trousers that probably cost as much as all my clothes put together. "Norbert," he exclaims with feigned enthusiasm. "Good to see you. How was your trip? Was the drive too tiring?" He says this as if I've come from another city, not a 15-minute drive. "Fine," I reply dryly. "Thanks for the invitation." "Don't mention it. Beverly and I have been wanting to invite you over for a long time. Family is the most important thing, right?" He puts his hand on Beverly's shoulder, and they exchange quick glances. There's something in that look, something I can't quite figure out. "Come into the living room," Beverly says. "I'll bring an aperitif." Clyde leads me into the living room, a spacious room with panoramic windows and minimalist furniture. Everything is in shades of gray and white, like an operating room. Only the huge plasma screen on the wall adds a little black to this monochrome picture. "Have a seat," Clyde points to the sofa. "Are you comfortable?" The sofa turns out to be unexpectedly hard. I sit on the edge, feeling out of place. "Quite," I reply, although I would actually prefer my old worn-out armchair. How's your health, Norbert? Clyde asks, sitting down in the chair opposite me. Beverly is worried about you. I'm fine, I snap. The last thing I want to do is discuss my health with this man. It's just my age catching up with me. Of course, of course. It's natural at your age. But you know, there are so many opportunities for older people now. Beautiful nursing homes with full service, special rehabilitation programs. I look at him, trying to understand where he's going with this. His eyes reveal something like professional interest, the way a real estate agent might look at a promising property. Beverly returns with a tray holding 3 glasses filled with something white and sparkling. Champagne, she announces, placing the tray on the coffee table. To our meeting. I haven't drunk alcohol for several years, ever since I started having heart problems. But today I'm making an exception. I take a glass and toast my daughter and son-in-law. To our meeting, I repeat and take a small sip. The champagne is dry and sour, leaving an unpleasant aftertaste. How are things in the city, Norbert? Clyde asks, leaning back in his chair. I heard the mayor is planning some innovations. I don't follow politics, I reply. I'm more interested in my garden. Ah, yes, your garden. Beverly said you spend a lot of time in it. It must be so peaceful. There is condescension in his voice, and I feel irritation rising inside me. But I hold back. I don't want to ruin the evening that has just begun. How's your work? I ask, changing the subject. Oh, great, Clyde perks up. Our company just signed a contract with a major international client. I'm leading the project, so the next 6 months are going to be very busy. He starts talking about his work, using terms that mean nothing to me. I nod, pretending to be interested. Beverly sits next to him, occasionally adding details or clarifications. They work for the same company in different departments, but apparently they often cross paths at work. Listening to them, I suddenly realize how far their lives are from mine. They speak a language I barely understand, live in a world where I have no place. And it's not just a generational difference, it's a choice. They have chosen a life where status, money, and career are important. I never pursued that. Simple things were more important to me. Home, family, work that brings satisfaction, not just income. How's your house, Dad? Beverly suddenly asks, interrupting Clyde's monologue. Is the roof leaking? Is the heating working properly? Everything's fine, I reply, although that's not entirely true. The roof really needs repairing, but I don't want her to know that. I'm managing. You know, she leans forward, Clyde and I were thinking, maybe you should consider moving. Your house is too big for one person, and it's getting harder and harder to maintain. There are wonderful senior living communities where you could... I'm not moving anywhere, I cut her off. This is my house. I lived here with your mother. My whole life has been here. Beverly sighs and exchanges glances with Clyde. That puzzled look again. Okay, Dad, I'm just worried about you. You live alone, and if something happens, nothing will happen to me, I say, even though the letter from the clinic is still in my pocket, reminding me of the inevitable. Dinner's almost ready, Clyde says, getting up. I'll go check on the steaks. Beverly, show your father around the house while I finish cooking. He goes into the kitchen and Beverly gets up from the sofa and holds out her hand to me. Come on, Dad. I'll show you what we've done to the house since the renovation. I get up, leaving my almost full glass of champagne on the table, and follow her. We walk through the dining room with its huge glass table, go up the stairs to the second floor, and look into the bedrooms and study. Everything is immaculate. Everything is expensive. Everything is foreign. In the master bedroom, Beverly stops at the dressing table and fixes her hair, looking in the mirror. You got the inheritance from Uncle Walter, right? She asked casually, without looking at me. There it is. The real reason for the invitation. Yes, I reply briefly. A small amount of money and a collection of watches. That's good, she turns to me. Now you can afford good care if you need it. You know, there are special clinics where... I'm not going to spend Walter's money on clinics, I interrupt. I have other plans. She looks at me in surprise, as if she didn't expect that answer. What plans? I don't know how to answer. I don't have any specific plans, just an instinctive desire not to let her and Clyde control what belongs to me. It's my money, Beverly. I'll decide how to spend it. She presses her lips together, but says nothing. We go downstairs just in time. Clyde calls us to the table. Dinner begins with an awkward silence. I sat across from Beverly. Clyde took his place at the head of the table, as if to emphasize his position as master of the house. I was given a hard chair with a high back, which started to ache my lower back after half an hour of sitting. However, that was the least of my problems. Try the steak, Dad, Beverly pointed to my untouched meat. Clyde specially selected the best cuts. I obediently cut off a small piece and put it in my mouth. The meat was tough, despite its beautiful pink color inside. Or maybe it was my teeth. Lately, even with dentures, it had become more difficult to chew. Very tasty, I lied, washing down the food with water. I had refused wine at the beginning of the dinner, citing my medication. I told you Clyde has a talent for cooking. Beverly smiled at her husband with such pride, as if he had saved at least a dozen lives, not just fried a piece of beef. Clyde responded with a modest shrug, but it was clear that he enjoyed the praise. It's just a hobby. If I had more time, I would really develop this skill. But work, you understand. I nodded, although I didn't really understand. In my day, we didn't turn ordinary household chores into hobbies and brag about our ability to cook simple meals. But times change, and I guess I'm hopelessly outdated along with my views. How's your project with the international client going? I asked, trying to keep the conversation going. The one you mentioned earlier. Clyde perked up as if he had been waiting for that question. Oh, it's going fantastically. We're implementing an innovative marketing analysis system that will allow us to track consumer trends in real time. Can you imagine the possibilities? I couldn't, but I smiled politely. Sounds impressive. It sure is. Clyde cut a piece of steak with surgical precision. If everything goes according to plan, I'll get a promotion next year. Maybe even a transfer to headquarters. Headquarters? I looked at Beverly. Where's that? New York, she replied, avoiding my gaze. We were just about to discuss it with you. If Clyde gets the promotion, we'll have to move. I felt something tighten inside me. Beverly was my only family, and despite our complicated relationship, the thought of her moving to another city caused a sudden wave of anxiety. New York? That's far away. It's only a couple of hours by plane, Clyde said casually. We'd visit you on holidays, and you could come visit us whenever you wanted, of course. We both knew I wouldn't get on a plane. I'd only flown twice in my entire life, and both times I swore I'd never do it again. Besides, with my health, but I didn't say that out loud. Sure, was all I said, returning to my steak. Beverly gave Clyde a warning look, and he quickly changed the subject. How's your house, Norbert? Is the roof okay? Last time we were there, I noticed a few problem areas. The roof is fine, I replied, even though that wasn't true. During the last heavy rain, it had leaked in two places, the living room and the bedroom. But I wasn't going to discuss that with them. I've got it under control. You know, Clyde leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. If you need help with repairs, I could recommend some excellent specialists. I have a friend at a construction company who will give you a good discount. Thanks, but I can handle it myself. My voice sounded sharper than I intended. An awkward silence ensued. Beverly gave me a disapproving look and turned to Clyde. Honey, would you pass the salad? It's in the fridge. Clyde nodded and went into the kitchen. As soon as the door closed behind him, Beverly leaned toward me. Dad, please don't be so closed off. Clyde just wants to help. We both do. I don't need help, I replied, trying to sound calm. And I don't understand why we keep coming back to the subject of my house. Because we're worried about you. Her voice took on a note of irritation. You live alone in a huge old house that's falling apart before your eyes. What if you fall? Or if there's a fire? Or... I've lived in this house for 40 years, Beverly, and I'll live as long as I'm meant to. She shook her head and was about to say something, but at that moment Clyde returned with a large glass bowl of salad. Here I am, he announced cheerfully, placing the bowl on the table. Fresh salad with arugula and pine nuts. Beverly, can you pass me the dressing? It's on the shelf in the refrigerator. Beverly got up and headed for the kitchen, giving me one last meaningful look. As soon as she left, Clyde turned to me and lowered his voice. Norbert, I understand how you feel. A house isn't just a building. It's memories, it's history. But think about the practical side of things. Maintaining such a large house is a serious expense, and it will only grow with each passing year. I can handle it, I repeated stubbornly. Right now, yes, Clyde leaned in closer. But what about a year from now? Or two? Beverly and I just want to make sure you're set for the future. I looked him straight in the eye. What about Walter's inheritance? Will that set me up for the future? Clyde flinched slightly but quickly regained his composure. Oh, you mean that? Yes, we heard about it. And of course, that's good news. But money has a way of running out, especially when it comes to medical expenses. At that moment, Beverly returned with a bottle of salad dressing. The conversation immediately shifted to more neutral topics. The weather, the latest city news, the upcoming festival in downtown Berwyn. I ate slowly, moving the food around my plate more than actually eating it. My appetite was completely gone. Every time I looked up, I caught the scrutinizing gaze of either Beverly or Clyde. They looked at me as if they were evaluating the condition of a used car they were considering buying, with doubt and calculation. After the main course, Beverly brought dessert, some kind of elaborate cake with many layers of different colors. It's millefeuille with berries and custard, she announced proudly. I ordered it from a new French patisserie in the city center. They say their pastry chef used to work in Paris at a restaurant with 3 Michelin stars. I looked at the cake and felt a heaviness in my stomach. I can't eat sweets. Type 2 diabetes, diagnosed 5 years ago, required a strict diet. Thanks, but I'll pass, I said. My doctor recommended limiting sweets. Oh, right. Your diabetes, Beverly looked disappointed. I completely forgot. Well, Clyde and I will try it anyway. Right, honey? Clyde nodded enthusiastically and immediately cut himself a large piece. I watched them eat the cake, exchanging comments about the texture, taste, and aftertaste, like professional tasters. It was a strange sight. My daughter and her husband enjoying an exquisite dessert, while I sat in front of an empty plate, feeling old and useless. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to step away for a moment, I said, getting up from the table. Where is the bathroom? Down the hall to the right, Beverly replied. Not the one near the kitchen. It's being renovated. You need to go further, to the end of the hall. I nodded and left the dining room. The hallway was long with several doors on both sides. Which one led to the bathroom? I moved forward slowly, leaning my hand against the wall for support. The house was quiet, except for the muffled voices of Beverly and Clyde coming from the dining room. When I reached the end of the hallway, I saw 2 doors. One was slightly ajar, and I could see the bathroom behind it. I was about to go in when I heard Clyde say my name. The voices from the dining room were now clearer. Apparently, the acoustics of the house were such that the sound from the dining room carried easily into the hallway. We need to do something about Norbert, Clyde was saying. He's clearly not in a position to assess the situation properly. Have you seen how his hands shake and that vacant stare he gets sometimes? I know, Beverly replied with a heavy sigh. But what can we do? He's as stubborn as a mule. He'll never admit he needs help. There are legal mechanisms. Clyde's voice became businesslike, as if he were discussing a work project. We can initiate proceedings to have him declared incompetent. At his age, with his health, it won't be difficult. I froze, not believing my ears. Incompetent? Me? Do you think it will work? Beverly's voice sounded doubtful. You need serious grounds for that. Medical reports, evidence. I have a doctor friend who can help with the paperwork, and we'll find witnesses. Norbert's neighbors must have noticed something strange about his behavior. Old people often behave eccentrically. I leaned against the wall, feeling the blood drain from my face. My own son-in-law is planning to have me declared insane. And my daughter? My own daughter? I don't know, Clyde. Beverly was still hesitant. It seems too radical. Maybe we should just talk to him again, convince him to sell the house and move into a nursing home? Then we could... Beverly, Clyde's voice became harsh. We've talked to him 100 times. He won't listen. And now with this inheritance from his brother, do you have any idea how much money that is? Not to mention the house, which is worth a fortune, even in its current condition. If we don't take decisive action, it will all be wasted or, worse, go to some crooks who will take advantage of him. You're right, but... Beverly paused for a moment. He's my father. No matter what, I don't want to hurt him. We're not hurting him, Clyde said more softly now, persuasively. We're protecting him and ourselves. Think about our future, about possibly moving to New York. We'll need this money to ensure we have a decent life there, an apartment in a good neighborhood, private school for the kids when they come along. You're right, Beverly finally agreed. We need to act decisively. I'll talk to Dad again next week. If he refuses to listen again, we'll start legal proceedings. Excellent decision, dear, Clyde said with satisfaction in his voice. In the meantime, let's be nice and caring. Let him think we're just concerned about his well-being. He's taking a long time, Beverly remarked. Should we go check on him? I quickly moved away from the wall and tiptoed toward the bathroom. Closing the door behind me, I leaned against it and closed my eyes. My heart was pounding like crazy. My hands were shaking, not from illness, but from shock and anger. So that's what this dinner was for. That's why they suddenly remembered I existed. Not because they missed me or were worried about me, but because they found out about the inheritance and now planned to get their hands on it. I looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. An old man with gray hair and a wrinkled face stared back at me with tired eyes. Did I really look that helpless? That incapable? I turned on the water and splashed my face with cold water. I needed to calm down and decide what to do next. Go back to the table and pretend I hadn't heard anything? Make a scene? Or? My gaze fell on a small window in the bathroom. It faced the side of the house, where there was no lighting. I walked over to the window and tried to open it. It yielded easily, without a squeak. Fresh evening air rushed into the room. Without further thought, I swung my leg over the windowsill. The window was not far from the ground, and I easily climbed down onto the lawn. Quietly closing the window, I quickly moved along the wall of the house to the street where my car was parked. When I reached the Ford, I opened the door with the key, trying not to make any noise. I got behind the wheel but didn't start the engine right away. First, I had to drive away from the house so that the noise of the engine wouldn't attract attention. I rolled the car in neutral to the intersection, and only then turned the ignition key. The engine started on the first try, as if it understood the critical nature of the situation. I turned on the headlights and slowly drove away from my daughter's house. Only after a few blocks did I allow myself to breathe deeply. I was shaking. My hands on the steering wheel were white with tension. Fragments of the overheard conversation spun around in my head. Incapacitated, legal proceedings, inheritance. Stopping at a traffic light, I took my phone out of my pocket. The screen showed 3 missed calls from Beverly, so she had already discovered my disappearance. I turned off my phone and threw it onto the passenger seat. The city floated by outside the car windows, quiet and sleepy. It was Friday evening, and most of Berwyn's residents were either at home with their families or in the few restaurants and bars. No one paid any attention to the old Ford slowly moving through the streets. I didn't immediately realize where I was going. I just wanted to get away from Beverly's house, from her fake concern, from Clyde's cold calculation. But gradually I realized that I was mechanically heading for the city cemetery, to the place where Edith was buried. Entering the cemetery grounds, I parked near a small chapel and turned off the engine. It was already completely dark, with only a few lights illuminating the main paths. Edith's grave was in the old part of the cemetery, under a large oak tree. I knew the way by heart. I had been coming here every week for 3 years. Getting out of the car, I slowly made my way along the familiar path. I didn't have a flashlight with me, but the full moon provided enough light to see the way. The cemetery was deserted and quiet, only the rustling of leaves breaking the silence of the night. Reaching Edith's grave, I knelt before the simple granite headstone. Edith Hampshire, beloved wife and mother, read the inscription, followed by the dates, 1935 to 2021. 76 years of life, contained in 2 numbers separated by a hyphen. Edith, I whispered, touching the cold stone. Our daughter. She wants to declare me insane. She wants to take everything I have, everything we had. I fell silent, holding back the tears that were welling up. Men of my generation are not used to crying. We were taught to be strong, resilient, unemotional. But now in the darkness of the cemetery, alone with the memory of the only woman who truly loved me, I couldn't hold back the tears. What did I do wrong, Edith? I asked into the void. Where did I go wrong? We gave her everything we could: love, care, education. Why is she so distant? Of course, there was no answer. Only the wind rustled the oak leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I wiped my tears with my jacket sleeve and slowly got to my feet. My knees ached from touching the cold ground, and my back was sore. Something was bothering me in my jacket pocket. I fumbled for the photo, the one from the picnic that I wanted to show Beverly. Now it seemed like a mockery of fate, a captured moment of happiness that turned out to be so fragile and short-lived. I stood by the grave a little longer, mentally saying goodbye to Edith, even though I knew I would be back here in a week, as usual. Then I slowly walked back to the car. I got behind the wheel but didn't start the engine right away. I sat in silence, thinking about what had happened. The overheard conversation still rang in my ears like a broken record. Declare incapacitated, legal mechanisms, our future. They won't get what doesn't belong to them. I'm not crazy. I'm not a helpless old man who can be manipulated. I still have enough strength and clarity of mind to stand up for myself. Starting the car, I turned on the headlights and slowly drove out of the cemetery. It was time to go home, to the house Edith and I bought 40 years ago, which is filled with memories of our life, of our real family. The drive home took about 20 minutes. All this time, the phone on the passenger seat vibrated periodically, but I ignored it. No matter what Beverly said, no matter what she promised, I no longer believed her. Not after what I had heard. When I pulled up to my house, I turned off the engine and sat in silence for a while. The house looked dark and empty. I had forgotten to set the timer on the lights when I left. But it was my home, my fortress, and I wasn't going to give it up. Getting out of the car, I slowly climbed the steps to the porch, fumbled for the keys in my pocket, and opened the front door. Inside, it smelled as usual: old wood, books, and the faint scent of lavender, which Edith always used for laundry. I turned on the light in the hallway and immediately headed for the living room. All the important documents were kept there, in the secretary desk: the deed to the house, insurance, bank statements. Walter's inheritance papers should have been there too. As I took out the folders with the documents, I already knew what I was going to do next. First thing tomorrow, I would go to a lawyer, not the one who handled Walter's inheritance, but a new one recommended by Peter from the cafe. I would change the will and arrange everything so that Beverly and Clyde couldn't get their hands on my property. Then I would call Dr. Freeman and ask for a full medical examination with documentary evidence of my sanity. They want war? They'll get it. I may be old, but I haven't given up yet. Sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the overheard conversation replaying over and over in my head. Every word, every intonation, every pause, everything was imprinted in my memory with painful clarity. Incapacitated. Legal mechanisms. Our future. Simple words that formed a monstrous plan. Dawn was breaking outside the window. I didn't notice how the night had flown by. Sleepless, filled with bitter thoughts. My body ached with fatigue, but my mind remained clear, even too clear. Images of the past and present replaced each other, forming a mosaic that I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. The clock on the bedside table showed 6 in the morning when I finally got out of bed. My legs felt like cotton wool, and a dull pain pulsed in my temples, a sure sign of high blood pressure. I needed to take my pills, but first, coffee. Strong, bitter, no sugar. Edith always said I didn't drink coffee, but liquid tar, but it was the only way to wake up completely for people like me. The kitchen was cool. The October morning breathed dampness that seeped through the cracks in the old window frames. I needed to replace them before winter. Otherwise, the heating bills would completely ruin me. Another worry on the endless list. Putting the kettle on the stove, I mechanically performed the usual actions, took the coffee jar out of the cupboard, measured 2 spoons into a cup, found the sugar bowl. My hands moved on their own while my thoughts returned to last night. Beverly had been calling all night. I turned off the phone after the 5th call, unable to hear her voice. What would she say? That she was worried? That she didn't understand why I left without saying goodbye? Lies, all lies. The kettle whistled, bringing me back to reality. I poured boiling water into the cup, stirred the coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. The morning light, streaming through the curtains, painted intricate patterns on the worn tabletop. Edith wanted to replace this table 10 years ago, but we kept putting it off. And then she got sick, and it wasn't a priority anymore. The first sip burned my throat. Hot, bitter, perfect. I closed my eyes, letting the caffeine do its job, dispelling the fog of fatigue, sharpening my senses. And as my body awoke, so did my memories. Not only of last night's dinner, but of other moments that now appeared in a new light. Beverly arrived a week after Edith's funeral, not to be with me, to share my grief, but to help sort through Mom's things. I remember how she methodically went through Edith's jewelry, setting aside anything of even the slightest value. "This is a vintage brooch, Dad. They're in style now. I'll take it as a memento of Mom, okay?" I didn't object at the time. What difference did it make who got these things? They wouldn't bring Edith back. Then there was Christmas 2 years ago. Beverly and Clyde invited me over. During dinner, Clyde casually asked, "Have you thought about selling the house, Norbert?" "It's too big for one person. Besides, real estate prices are high right now. You could get a decent amount of money for it. Or that time 6 months ago when I fell in the backyard and sprained my ankle. It was nothing serious, just a bruise that went away quickly." But Beverly, having heard about it from a neighbor, rushed over with a whole folder of brochures about nursing homes. "Dad, it's for your own good. They'll take better care of you there than you can take of yourself." All these episodes, which had previously seemed like expressions of concern, albeit clumsy and intrusive, now appeared in a different light. It wasn't concern. It was a cold, calculated strategy aimed at one goal: to take possession of my property. The coffee in my cup was gone, but the bitterness remained in my mouth. I got up to pour another cup, but changed my mind. Too much caffeine is bad for the heart, and I need to take care of my health now more than ever. Instead, I took orange juice out of the fridge and made toast with jam, a simple breakfast that required no effort. Chewing on tasteless toast, I continued to ponder. When did it all go wrong? When did my only daughter become someone who would declare her own father incompetent for money? Was it my fault? Maybe I was too strict with her when she was growing up, or maybe I didn't show her enough love. Edith always said I was bad at expressing my feelings, that I kept everything inside. Maybe Beverly grew up thinking I didn't love her. No, that's no excuse. Many children grow up with imperfect parents, but not all of them turn into calculating manipulators. Something broke in Beverly, something fundamental. Or maybe it was Clyde's influence. From the first time I met him, this man instilled an instinctive distrust in me. There was always calculation in his eyes, even when he smiled and paid compliments. I remembered how he looked at me yesterday at dinner, studying me, evaluating me, as if calculating how long I had left to live and how much it would cost them. And Beverly, she looked at me the same way. My daughter, my flesh and blood, no, not mine anymore. Last night destroyed the last illusion of family ties. Now all that remains between us is a legal relationship that needs to be urgently reviewed. After finishing breakfast, I went into the living room and sat down at the old secretary desk I had inherited from my father. The top drawer held all the important documents: the deed to the house, insurance policies, bank statements. I took them out and laid them on the table, trying to get a complete picture of my financial situation. The house had been paid off 15 years ago, so there were no problems there. My pension was modest but stable. My health insurance covered the basic costs of treatment, although with the new diagnosis, the situation could change. And of course, there was Walter's inheritance, a significant amount in the bank account, and a collection of watches valued at a decent sum. Overall, I was set for the rest of my life, provided I spent wisely. But it wasn't about the money, it was about principle. I would not allow my daughter and her husband to control my life and my property. Taking out a notebook, I began to draw up a plan of action. First, a lawyer. I needed a good specialist in inheritance law who could help me draw up a new will. Second, a medical examination to document my mental capacity. Third, the bank. Perhaps I should transfer some of the funds to another account that Beverly couldn't access. As I wrote down these points, another more radical plan formed in my head. What if I left Berwyn altogether? Start a new life somewhere else, where no one knows me? where Beverly couldn't find me and continue her manipulations? The thought was both frightening and exciting. Starting from scratch at 73, looking for a new home, new friends, a new daily routine? On the other hand, what keeps me in Barrowin besides memories? My friends have long since moved away or died. I haven't had a job in years. Only the house. Only Edith's grave. Edith's grave. That's what keeps me here. I couldn't leave and leave her alone. That would be a betrayal. No, I'll stay in Bruin. But I'll change my life so that Beverly and Clyde can't hurt me anymore. The phone I turned on in the morning rang again. Beverly. I stared at the screen, not daring to answer. What would I say to her? That I knew about her plans? That I no longer considered her my daughter? There was too much to say, and at the same time, there was no point in saying anything. The phone went silent, but a minute later a message arrived. Dad, please call. We're worried. We don't understand why you left. Was there some kind of misunderstanding? Misunderstanding. What a convenient word to mask betrayal. I deleted the message without replying. Beverly would get an answer, but not now and not in the form of a phone call. Glancing at my watch, I saw that it was almost 10. It was time to act. I gathered my documents, changed into more formal attire, a gray suit I only wore for important meetings, and left the house. The day was cool but sunny. Almost all the leaves had fallen from the trees, exposing their gnarled branches. Winter would soon arrive, another test for the old house and its owner. But I was determined to survive this too. My first stop was the office of Alan Penbrook, a lawyer recommended by Peter from the cafe. It was located in a small 2-story building in the city center, next to the municipal building. The most honest lawyer in Berwyn was how Peter described him, and that recommendation seemed convincing enough to me. Entering the modestly furnished reception area, I explained the purpose of my visit to the secretary. The young woman with a neat bun of blonde hair listened attentively and said that Mr. Penbrook was busy at the moment, but would be able to see me in an hour. I decided to wait. Every minute counted today. Sitting in the reception area, I went over the details of the upcoming conversation in my mind. I needed to do more than just change the will. I needed protection from possible legal manipulation by Beverly and Clyde. If they really decided to declare me incompetent, I would need all the protection I could get. The hour of waiting passed unnoticed. The secretary showed me into Mr. Penbrook's office, a small room with bookshelves along the walls and a massive oak desk in the middle. The lawyer himself turned out to be a thin man in his 50s with piercing gray eyes and thinning hair. Mr. Hampshire, he said, rising from his desk and extending his hand. How can I help you? I shook his hand, a firm, confident handshake, and sat down in the chair he offered me. Then, taking a deep breath, I began to explain my situation. I told him everything about Walter's inheritance, about Beverly and Clyde's sudden interest in my well-being, about the conversation I had overheard, about the plans to have me declared incompetent. Mr. Penbrook listened attentively, without interrupting, making brief notes in his notebook. His face remained impassive, only his eyebrows occasionally raised in surprise or interest. So, he said when I finished, you want to change the will, excluding your daughter from the list of heirs, and protect yourself from possible incapacitation. Am I correct in understanding that? Yes, that's right, I confirmed. Well, let's start with the will. It's relatively simple. You can dispose of your property as you see fit. Who would you like to leave your inheritance to? This question caught me off guard. I was so focused on disinheriting Beverly that I hadn't thought about who to leave it to instead. I don't know, I admitted honestly. I don't have any other close relatives. Mr. Penbrook nodded understandingly. In cases like this, people often leave their property to charities, educational institutions, or medical facilities. Is there anything that is particularly dear to you? Any cause you would like to support? I thought about it. What was dear to me? What mattered in this life when all bridges had been burned and the future was shrinking to a few years, or perhaps even months? Then it dawned on me. St. Agnes Children's Home, I said. My wife Edith volunteered there for the last 10 years of her life. She valued that work very much. Mr. Penbrook's face softened. An excellent choice. St. Agnes Children's Home is a respected institution with a long history. I can draft a will that will transfer your property, including your home and financial assets, to them after your death. Are there any specific conditions you would like to include? I thought about it some more. Yes, I want the house to be sold and the proceeds to go toward educational programs for the children. And I want an Edith Hampshire scholarship to be established for orphanage graduates who go on to college. Mr. Penbrook wrote down my wishes and nodded. Very well. Now let's talk about the more complicated part. Protection from being declared incompetent. This is a serious legal action that requires compelling grounds. It usually requires medical evidence of dementia, mental disorder, or another condition that renders a person incapable of making decisions. I have been diagnosed with early-stage Parkinson's disease, I said, but it does not affect my mental abilities. I am of sound mind. In that case, we need documentary evidence of this. I recommend undergoing a full medical examination, including neuropsychological tests. This will establish a basis for proving your sanity at this point in time. In addition, it would be helpful to have testimony from other people, friends, neighbors, doctors, about your adequate behavior and clarity of mind. I nodded, mentally compiling a list of people who could serve as witnesses. Peter from the cafe, Doctor. Freeman, my neighbor Mrs. Brooks, who often stops by for a chat. There is one more thing, Mr. Penbrook continued. You can appoint someone in advance to be your trusted representative in case you do become incapacitated in the future. This will prevent your daughter from being automatically appointed to this role. Who do you suggest for this role? Usually it's a close friend or other relative you trust. If you don't have anyone like that, you can appoint a professional guardian or trustee, such as a lawyer or financial advisor. I thought about it. I didn't have anyone I could trust with such responsibility. My friends were either too old or had already passed away. I had no other relatives. Can you recommend someone for this role? I finally asked. Mr. Penbrook nodded. I can suggest several professional guardians who specialize in such cases. They will act strictly in your best interests, according to predetermined instructions. That sounds reasonable. All right, I will prepare all the necessary documents. A new will, a power of attorney in case of incapacity, and a list of recommended guardians. It will take a few days. In the meantime, I advise you to undergo a medical examination as soon as possible. I thanked Mr. Penbrook and got up to leave. He walked me to the door and said goodbye. Mr. Hampshire, one more piece of advice, if I may. Don't make any rash decisions based on your emotions. What you have learned is certainly shocking and infuriating, but before you completely sever ties with your daughter, perhaps it would be worth talking to her directly? I shook my head. What can you say to someone who plans to have you declared insane for money? No, Mr. Penbrook. Some bridges are burned beyond repair. I spent the next 3 days busy with the formalities of changing the will. It turned out to be a more complicated process than I had anticipated. Alan Penbrook, the lawyer Peter had recommended, was meticulous and thorough, exactly what I needed. Early Monday morning, I was back in his office, poring over the legal details. Mr. Hampshire, Penbrook tapped his pencil on the table. In order for your new will to be indisputable, we need to establish a solid documentary basis for your legal capacity. I nodded, watching the gray October clouds slowly drift by outside the window. What does that require? First of all, a report from several independent doctors. Have you already made an appointment with Dr. Freeman? Yes. I took my notebook out of my pocket. The appointment is tomorrow at 10 in the morning. Excellent. Ask him to give an official report on your mental capacity. It would also be a good idea to get a second opinion from a neurologist or geriatrician. I have a referral to Dr. Glover, a neurologist. The appointment is in 2 days. Penbrook nodded approvingly and made a note in his notebook. Good. Now about the will itself. Are you determined to exclude your daughter? That question made me pause for a moment. Despite everything that had happened, completely removing Beverly from the will seemed final, as if I were signing the death certificate of our relationship. Yes, I finally replied. I want all my property to go to St. Agnes Children's Home. I see. Penbrook made another note. In that case, we'll need to contact the administration of the children's home to clarify the details of the transfer of property. Are there any specific conditions you would like to include? I closed my eyes, imagining Edith returning from the orphanage, tired but happy, talking about the children she worked with. She talked especially about the talented kids who dreamed of college but couldn't afford it. Yes, I said, opening my eyes. I want most of the money to go to educational scholarships for orphanage graduates, and I want those scholarships to be named after Edith Hampshire. Pembroke smiled for the first time since we had met. A noble decision. We'll include that in the will. What about your house and personal belongings? The house can be sold and the proceeds added to the scholarship fund. Personal belongings. I thought for a moment. I didn't have many valuable items except perhaps Walter's watch collection. The watches can be sold at auction. They're quite valuable. What about family heirlooms? Photographs, letters, mementos. Wouldn't you like to leave something for Beverly despite everything? This question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about family heirlooms, photo albums, Edith's letters, her jewelry that I had kept. It would be sacrilegious to throw them away, but I didn't want to give them to Beverly after everything that had happened. I'll think about it, I finally said. Maybe some of the photos and letters, but not now. Right now, I want to focus on the main will. Of course, Pembroke closed his notebook. I'll prepare a draft of the will for your next visit. In the meantime, gather all the medical reports and think about witnesses to sign the will. We'll need 2 people who have no interest in your inheritance. I can ask Peter from the cafe and maybe Mrs. Brooks, my neighbor. Excellent. Then let's schedule our next meeting for Friday at 2 o'clock, shall we? By that time, you will have all the medical reports. We shook hands and I left the office feeling that I was making the right choice. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my life. It was cold outside. The wind blew fallen leaves across the sidewalk, and the sky was overcast, promising rain. I turned up the collar of my coat and headed for the bus stop. My old car had started to break down, so I decided not to risk using public transportation to get around town. While I was waiting for the bus, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I took it out and looked at the screen. Beverly, again. It was her 20th or 30th call in the last few days. I hadn't answered any of them, nor had I responded to the numerous messages she had left. Dad, please answer. We're worried. Dad, I don't understand what happened. Let's talk. If you don't answer, I'll come to you. Please call. I turned off the sound and put the phone back in my pocket. Beverly had indeed come by last night, knocking on the door, ringing the bell, but I didn't open it. I sat in the dark living room, listening to her pleas and felt only fatigue. No anger, no pain, just a deep, all-consuming fatigue. Finally, she left, leaving a note under the door. Dad, please let me know you're okay. I'm very worried. Beverly. She's worried. About my health or her inheritance? The bus pulled up, its brakes squealing. I climbed the steps, showed my pension card to the driver, and sat by the window. The next stop was St. Agnes Children's Home. I decided to stop by there before going home. I wanted to make sure I was making the right decision. The orphanage was located on the outskirts of Berwyn, in an old 3-story Victorian building. It had once been the mansion of a wealthy family, but in the 19th century it was converted into an orphanage. Since then, the building had been renovated and modernized several times, but it had retained its historic appearance. Turrets, tall windows, a wide porch. I got off the bus and slowly walked along the path to the main entrance. The last time I had been here was for Christmas 3 years ago, when Edith was still alive. She played the role of Mrs. Claus, handing out gifts to the children that we had bought together over several months. It was our little ritual. Edith made a wish list for each child, and I helped her choose and wrap the gifts. I hesitated for a moment at the door. What would I say? How would I explain my visit? Hello, I've decided to leave you all my property because my daughter turned out to be a greedy traitor. That didn't sound very good, but it was too late to back out. The door opened, and a young woman in a strict gray suit appeared on the threshold. Can I help you? She asked with a polite smile. Yes, I cleared my throat. My name is Norbert Hampshire. My late wife Edith volunteered here several years ago. I would like to speak to the director if possible. The woman's face lit up. Oh, Mr. Hampshire. Of course, we remember Edith. She was a wonderful person. Please come in. Miss Turner is here now. I'll take you to her. I entered a spacious hall with walls covered with children's drawings and photographs. Somewhere deep inside the building, I could hear children's voices, laughter, shouts, the usual noise of life. It was a lively, warm house despite its institutional nature. The woman led me down the hallway to a small office. There was a sign on the door, Helen Turner, director. She knocked and, hearing an invitation, opened the door. Miss Turner, you have a visitor. This is Mr. Hampshire, husband of Edith Hampshire, who was a volunteer here. A tall woman in her 50s, with short graying hair and a penetrating gaze, rose from behind her desk. She extended her hand to me. Mr. Hampshire, it's very nice to meet you. Please have a seat. I sat down in a chair across from her desk and got straight to the point. Miss Turner, I recently reviewed my will and decided to leave my estate to your institution. Before finalizing the paperwork, I would like to learn more about how such donations are used. Her eyebrows rose slightly in surprise, but her voice remained calm. That is a very generous decision, Mr. Hampshire. Usually, such donations go toward improving children's living conditions, educational programs, and medical care. Depending on the donor's wishes, of course. I have a specific wish, I said. I would like most of the funds to go toward educational scholarships for your graduates. The Edith Hampshire scholarships. Miss Turner smiled and her face softened. That's a wonderful idea. Edith always cared deeply about our graduates, especially those who wanted to continue their education but didn't have the financial means to do so. Such scholarships could change many lives for the better. For the next hour, Miss Turner showed me around the children's home, showing me the classrooms, bedrooms, play areas, and a small library. There were children of all ages everywhere, from toddlers to teenagers. Some looked at me with curiosity, while others were too absorbed in their activities to pay attention to the elderly visitor. In one of the rooms, a drawing class was in session. Children aged 8 or 9 sat at easels, diligently drawing bright lines with their brushes. The teacher, a young woman with long brown hair, walked among them, giving advice and encouragement. This is our art therapy, explained Miss Turner. Many children come to us with traumatic experiences. Art helps them express their feelings and cope with their pain. I watched as a little girl with a serious expression painted a bright sun above a house. Next to the house were 2 figures, one large and one small, holding hands. That's Lily, Miss Turner said quietly. She's been with us for 2 years. Her mother died of an overdose, and her father's unknown. When she first came to us, she didn't talk and only drew in black. Now, as you can see, bright colors have appeared in her drawings. Something tightened in my chest. I thought about Beverly, how lucky she was to have loving parents, a home, opportunities. And this is how she repaid them, with betrayal and greed. And this little girl, deprived of everything, found the strength to draw the sun and dream of a family. Your wife often worked with our artists, Miss Turner continued as we left the room. She had a special way with children. They loved her very much. Yes, I smiled, remembering. Edith always said that every child is a universe of possibilities. You just have to help them unfold. We ended the tour in Miss Turner's office, where she showed me a folder of success stories, photos and stories of orphanage graduates who had managed to build successful lives despite their difficult beginnings. See this young man? She pointed to a photo of a smiling boy in a graduation gown. That's Jason. He was with us from the age of 7 to 18. He's now in medical school, wants to be a pediatrician. A talented boy, but without a scholarship, he wouldn't be able to continue his education. I nodded, feeling my resolve strengthen. This is where my money should go. Not to Beverly and Clyde's luxurious life in New York, but to creating opportunities for children who are less fortunate than their parents. The next day, I went to see Dr. Freeman. He was puzzled by my request for a full examination and an official statement of my legal capacity, but he didn't ask any unnecessary questions. After a series of tests and examinations, he gave me a document confirming that, despite my diagnosis of Parkinson's disease, I was fully capable and able to make my own decisions. From the clinic, I went to a neurologist, Dr. Glover, for a second opinion. He conducted an even more thorough examination, including an MRI of my brain, and also confirmed my legal capacity. With 2 medical reports in my folder, I felt more confident. Now it would be much more difficult for Beverly and Clyde to declare me incapacitated. When I returned home, I found another note from Beverly. this time slipped under the door. Dad, I'm getting more and more worried. If you don't respond, I'll have to call the police. Please let me know that you're okay. The threat of calling the police was a new twist. Well, let her call. The police will make sure I'm okay, and that will be the end of it. I don't have to talk to my daughter if I don't want to. Nevertheless, I decided to send her a short message. I'm fine. I need some time alone. Please respect that. After sending it, I turned off my phone again. On Friday at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was sitting in Alan Penbrook's office. Peter and Mrs. Brooks were sitting nearby, ready to sign the documents as witnesses. Penbrook slowly read the text of the will, and I listened, feeling strangely detached, as if it were about someone else. My house, bank accounts, securities, Walter's watch collection, everything was being transferred to St. Agnes Children's Home on the condition that a scholarship fund named after Edith Hampshire be established. Small sums were allocated for the funeral and for the executor's fee, a role that Penbrook himself agreed to take on. There was no mention of Beverly in the will. It was as if I had never had a daughter. When Penbrook finished reading, the room fell silent. Peter and Mrs. Brooks exchanged glances but said nothing. They had, of course, noticed the absence of any mention of Beverly, but they were too tactful to comment on it. If you have no questions or objections, Mr. Hampshire, we can proceed with the signing, Penbrook said, handing me a pen. I took the pen, but hesitated for a moment. By signing this document, I would be renouncing Beverly for good. Despite everything that had happened, it was not an easy decision. After all, I had held her in my arms on her birthday, taught her to ride a bike, and been proud of her first successes at school. But I had also heard her and Clyde plotting to have me declared incompetent so they could take possession of my property. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. With a heavy heart but a steady hand, I signed the will. Peter and Mrs. Brooks signed as witnesses. Penbrook certified the document with his seal. Congratulations, Mr. Hampshire, he said, shaking my hand. Now your will is protected by law. I will send a copy of the will to St. Agnes's orphanage, as we agreed. The original will be kept in my safe. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. The decision had been made, and it was the right one. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The phone in my pocket vibrated again. Beverly, for the umpteenth time. I didn't answer. Whatever she had to say now was too late. The bridges had been burned, the decisions made. Now all that was left was to live on, day by day, finding meaning in the little things and preparing for whatever the future would bring. It happened on Sunday. I was busy in the garden, trying to prepare the apple trees for winter, when I heard the sound of a car approaching. The familiar silver Audi stopped at the gate, and I knew immediately that the reprieve was over. Beverly had come for an explanation. I straightened up, leaning on my garden shears, and watched her get out of the car. She was wearing an elegant blue coat and high-heeled shoes, completely unsuitable for walking in the garden. Clyde wasn't with her, which surprised me a little. Apparently, she had decided to talk to me alone. Dad, she waved when she spotted me among the trees and walked down the path toward me. I finally found you. I didn't move, continuing to stand leaning on the shears. Let her come to me. There was no need for me to rush to meet her. Good afternoon, Beverly, I said when she got closer. To what do I owe this sudden visit? She stopped a few steps away from me, clearly surprised by my cold tone. Dad, what's going on? You disappeared from our dinner. You're not answering your phone. You're not opening the door. I was worried sick. She seemed genuinely concerned, but I no longer believed in her sincerity. I remembered their conversation with Clyde too well. Every word, every intonation. Worried, I smirked. What exactly are you worried about, Beverly? My health or your inheritance? Her face froze for a moment, then she frowned. What are you talking about? Your health, of course. You've been acting strange lately. Clyde and I think you need... I know what you and Clyde think, I interrupted. I heard your conversation after dinner. Every word. Now her face showed confusion mixed with anxiety. What conversation? Dad, you're scaring me. Why don't we go inside? It's getting cold, and you're standing here in just a sweater. She tried to take my arm, but I pulled away. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. The conversation about declaring me incompetent, about legal mechanisms, about my inheritance from Walter, about how you need that money for your future in New York. With every word, Beverly grew paler. She opened her mouth, then closed it, finding nothing to say. Finally, she took a deep breath and shook her head. Dad, you've got it all wrong. We were talking about, don't lie to me. My voice was calm but firm. I heard every word. You and Clyde were discussing how to find a doctor who would write the necessary report, how to use the neighbors as witnesses to my eccentric behavior, how all this money would help you with the move and private school for the children when they arrive. Do you remember those words? Beverly lowered her eyes, her shoulders slumped. For a moment, I even felt sorry for her. Cornered, caught in a lie, she looked small and defenseless, like when I caught her doing something wrong as a child. Dad, it was just a conversation, she finally said, looking up. We weren't going to do anything. Clyde sometimes speaks without thinking. You know that. And you? Did you also speak without thinking when you agreed with him? When you said that if I didn't agree to move into a nursing home, you would start legal proceedings? She sighed and ran her hand through her hair, a gesture she had inherited from me. It was strange to see these little echoes of myself in her, knowing that inside we had become complete strangers. It was said in the heat of the moment, she tried to justify herself. We really do worry about you. You live alone in a huge house that's falling apart before our eyes. You're starting to show signs of some kind of illness. Don't deny it. I've seen your hands shaking. What will happen when you can no longer take care of yourself? I shook my head. Even now, caught in a lie, she continued to play the role of the caring daughter. I would believe your concern if I hadn't heard you and Clyde discussing my money, how you plan to spend it, how you need this money for your future. Not a word about my well-being, only yours. Beverly suddenly became angry. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes narrowed. What do you want to hear? That we're saints? That we don't need money? Of course we do. Everyone does. Are you going to take it with you to the grave? Or leave it to strangers? I smiled, and that smile must have looked strange because Beverly suddenly stopped. What? She asked suspiciously. What did you do? I changed my will, I replied calmly. All my property now goes to St. Agnes Children's Home, where your mother worked, for educational scholarships for orphans. Beverly looked at me as if I had hit her. Shock, disbelief, anger. These emotions flashed across her face with kaleidoscopic speed. You can't do that, she finally managed to say. I'm your daughter, your only heir. I already did, I said, folding the scissors and heading for the house. The will is signed, notarized, and deposited. You won't get a cent. She followed me, almost running, stumbling in her high heels. Dad, wait. You can't just... It's not fair. We're family. I stopped at the porch and turned to her. Family? I shook my head. Family doesn't plan to have you declared insane for money. Family doesn't discuss how to spend your inheritance while you're still alive. A family comes to your aid when you're in trouble, not just when you have money. I did come, she exclaimed. I called you every month. I invited you to dinner. Once a month, Beverly. 5 minutes of small talk. How are you, Dad? Everything okay? I have to run. I have a meeting. And dinner. Only after you found out about Walter's inheritance. She opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it, finding no words. We stood facing each other, father and daughter, bound by blood but separated by a chasm of mutual misunderstanding and resentment. Let's talk inside, I finally said, tired of standing in the cold. I'll make some tea. The house was warm. I had turned on the heaters in the morning, knowing it would be a cold day. Beverly took off her coat and looked around as if she were seeing the house for the first time. Perhaps it was. On her last visits, she had barely crossed the threshold of the hallway, not going any further. It's cozy here, she said, clearly surprised. I thought it would be worse. Did you expect to see ruin? I smiled as I put the kettle on. To confirm your theory about my incompetence? She didn't answer, sitting down at the kitchen table, the same worn one that Edith wanted to replace. Dad, let's be honest, she said after a pause. I admit that conversation with Clyde looked unsightly, but you have to understand, we really are worried about you. You're getting older, you have health problems. I have Parkinson's, I said bluntly. Early stage. Her eyes widened. What? Why didn't you tell me? Why would I? So you could use it as another argument to have me declared incompetent. Dad, this is a serious disease. You'll need help, care. I know, I nodded, placing a cup of tea in front of her. And I've already made arrangements. Part of Walter's inheritance will go toward my medical expenses. I've arranged for a caregiver when I need one. I have a trusted person in case I really do become incapacitated. Everything is under control. Beverly looked at me in amazement, as if she were seeing me for the first time. You've thought of everything. Of course, I sat down across from her. I may be an old man with shaky hands, but my mind still works perfectly well. And I can take care of myself. Without your help. I said the last word with a hint of irony, and Beverly noticed. She looked down at her cup. You'll never forgive me, will you? The question caught me off guard. I had expected further excuses, maybe even anger, but not this direct question about forgiveness. I don't know, I answered honestly. Not right now. Maybe with time. But I don't think our relationship will ever be the same. She nodded, accepting my answer. I understand. But the will, are you really going to leave everything to strangers? What about the family heirlooms, the photographs? The photographs and letters will stay with you, I said. I've already set aside the albums in the box of your mother's letters. You can take them today if you want. The rest, the house, the money, the watch collection, will all go to the orphanage. Beverly sat silently, twirling a cup in her hands. I could see different emotions fighting inside her. Anger, disappointment, humility. You know, she finally said, when I was little, you were my hero. The strongest, the smartest, the kindest. I was proud of you. And then I grew up and saw that you were just a man. With your flaws, your mistakes, you were so stubborn, so uncompromising. Remember how you forbade me to go to Eastern College? It was my dream, and you destroyed it. I sighed, that old argument coming up again and again. I couldn't afford to pay for that college, Beverly. Your mother and I were barely making ends meet after the mine closed. I could have gotten a scholarship, she exclaimed, or taken out a student loan, but you wouldn't even listen. The local university is just as good, she mimicked my voice. And then you wondered why I left right after graduation and rarely came back. I shook my head. Did it all start then? This rift between us that only deepened over the years? I did what I thought was right, I said. Maybe I was wrong, but I always wanted the best for you. No, she objected. You wanted me to live the way you thought was right. By your rules, in your city, in your world. You never asked what I wanted. There was some truth in her words, and it hurt to admit it. Maybe I really was too authoritarian as a father, too sure of myself. But that didn't justify her recent actions. Even if that's true, I said, it doesn't justify what you and Clyde were planning. Declaring me incompetent is more than just a daughter's resentment toward her father. It's betrayal. Beverly sighed and leaned back in her chair. I know, and I'm sorry, I really am. Clyde, he can be very persuasive and persistent. He said it was for your own good, that you'd be better off in a nursing home. And the money, well, it wouldn't be wasted. It would just be transferred from one family member to another. Clyde cares a lot about your well-being, doesn't he? I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. Beverly looked at me with a strange expression that revealed some kind of inner struggle. Clyde cares about Clyde, she finally said quietly. I'm starting to understand that. Her words surprised me. Was their perfect marriage not as perfect as it seemed? What do you mean? She shook her head. Nothing specific. It's just, sometimes I feel like I'm not living my own life. That he makes all the decisions and I just follow him. Like at dinner. It was his idea to invite you. His plan to talk about moving to a nursing home. I just went along with it. Like with the plan to have me declared incompetent? She lowered her eyes. Yes, but I didn't think it would come to that. I thought it was just talk. We sat in silence, finishing our tea. It was getting dark outside. The short autumn day was coming to an end. Winter would soon be here, the hardest time of year for the old house and its occupant. But I was ready for it, just as I was ready for whatever the future might bring. What are you going to do now? Beverly asked, breaking the silence. Live, I replied simply. Take care of the garden, read books, Maybe volunteer at the orphanage. I still have time before the disease takes its toll. What about me? Will we see each other? I thought about it. Do I want to maintain some kind of relationship with my daughter? Will I ever be able to trust her again? I don't know, I replied honestly. Right now I need space. Time to think things through. Maybe later. We can start over. But not like before. Beverly nodded, accepting my answer. She got up from the table. I'll go. Thanks for the tea and for your honesty. I walked her to the door. She put on her coat, turned as if she wanted to say something, but then just nodded and left. I watched her walk to her car, get behind the wheel, and drive away from the house. Part of me felt relieved that the confrontation was over, but another part felt sad, realizing that my daughter and I had become strangers. Closing the door, I returned to the living room and sat down in my favorite chair. The house seemed unusually quiet after Beverly left, as if it were digesting what had happened. I took a photo album from the shelf, one of those I had set aside for my daughter, but which she had forgotten to take. I opened it and began to flip through the pages, watching Beverly change from infancy to childhood, from childhood to adolescence. Here she is, a newborn, a tiny bundle in the arms of a happy Edith. Here are her first steps, her first day at school, her first bicycle. Here is her high school graduation. She is smiling in her cap and gown, and Edith and I are standing on either side of her, proud and happy. And here is the last photo of us all together. Christmas, a year before Edith's illness. Beverly came for the holidays and brought Clyde, who had just become her fiancé. We are all smiling at the camera, but now I can see that the smiles are forced and Beverly's eyes are looking somewhere else, as if her thoughts were already elsewhere. Closing the album, I put it on the table. Well, that was the end of that chapter of my life. The chapter in which I was the father of a daughter who no longer wanted to be my daughter. Of course, biologically, we will always be connected, but true family ties are more than just blood. I got up and walked over to the window. It was completely dark outside, and the living room, lit by the warm light of a lamp, was reflected in the glass. An old house full of memories, but still sturdy, still standing. Just like me. Tomorrow would be a new day. I would go to the orphanage and offer my help. Maybe I could read books to the children or help them with their homework. Then I'll stop by Dr. Freeman's office to discuss the new treatment methods he mentioned, and in the evening, I might invite Peter and Mrs. Brooks over for dinner. It's long past time to thank them for their help and support. Life goes on even when it seems to have ended. Edith often said that during the last months of her illness. At the time, I didn't understand what she meant. Now I do. I turned away from the window and looked around. It's time to freshen up the house a bit. Maybe rearrange the furniture, buy new curtains, finally fix the leaky roof. Make this place my own, only mine, without the ghosts of the past, without expectations and disappointments. A new chapter, a new beginning. At 73, it sounds almost ridiculous, but why not? I still have time. Time to live the way I want. Time to find peace and, perhaps, a little happiness before I go to where Edith is waiting for me. Taking a deep breath, I felt the weight of the last few days begin to lift. Instead, a strange feeling of lightness, almost freedom, came over me. It was as if, having lost my daughter, I had unexpectedly found myself. I smiled at the thought. Well, so be it. Let this loss become a gain. Let the end become the beginning. After all, isn't that the meaning of any story? Every ending is just the beginning of something new. And my story isn't over yet. It's just starting a new chapter.